We're in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada, located in the center of the North American continent. And as you can see behind me, it experiences snowy conditions and in extreme cases, 9 out of the 12 months of the year. Now, as you can imagine, living here includes adjusting to extreme conditions. But what does it take to live out here and to build out here? We'll find out on this episode of Blueprint. I'm Nan Zapanta. As an industrial designer, I spent years admiring the great designs of products, vehicles, and architecture from all over the world. But I've found architecture to be the most captivating. I love learning about each building, discovering the characteristics that make it unique, and understanding the purpose behind its design. Most of all, I love hearing the stories behind each structure and seeing God's plan in putting it all together. Join us as we discover the blueprint of the buildings and structures inside the Iglesia Ni Cristo. As a young teen growing up in Southern California, extreme weather was rarely ever an issue. It was practically summer all year long. So the only thing we really worried about was staying cool from the heat. But what I learned later on was the role that climate played in the construction and design of buildings. Here in Southern California, you'll notice that a lot of the buildings, a lot of the schools, and a lot of the malls even have an open air layout. This is to keep the building cool as well as the people cool, but most of all to take advantage of the Mediterranean style climate that we have here in Southern California. I also learned that climate plays a big role in the construction of buildings, especially in places with freezing temperatures, like Regina, Canada. So we're on our way to meet Michael Bigayan. He's one of my colleagues from our Eastern Canada office, and he's also the voice of the Centennial series. He grew up here in Regina along with his family, and we're gonna meet up with him because he's gonna show us around. So in a few seconds, we'll meet up with him and we'll get to know more about the city of Regina and the congregation. All right, we're here. Hey, Michael.
Hey, Nat. How are you?
Good to see you. How are you?
Pretty good. How are you?
How's the drive?
That's okay. That's okay. How did you find the place? Okay.
I did.
Yeah.
Got through the snow.
Okay.
But
good.
before we do anything, inquiring minds want to know: is it Regina or Regina?
It's Regina. Yeah.
So it's
Regina.
Regina.
Yeah.
Can you,
it's Regina.
Why is it Regina?
Well, at the time when the area was being settled, it had the nickname Pile of Bones.
The nickname came from the pile of buffalo and bison bones discovered on the banks of Wascana Creek by early settlers in the 1800s. As the region grew, the name became less and less appropriate.
They wanted to give it a more regal name, so in honor of the Queen at the time, Queen Victoria, the name Regina came up. And I guess from what we understand, Regina is Latin for queen. So
hence the name Regina.
Hence the name Regina.
Okay, so it's clear. It's not Regina. It's Regina. And now we're here in this is your old neighborhood.
Yeah.
Right, and this is right here. This house that we're looking at. This is Michael's house here in Regina, or it was his house, and was where you guys first had the worship services.
Yeah, that's correct.
Wow, in the basement.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
The basement itself was pretty small, and we had set up our lawn chairs in there. That's all that we had for extra seating, and the worship service, the lessons, like the hymn singing and the lessons, it was all on audio cassette tape.
Wow.
Yeah. So all that we can do is just listen.
After worshiping in the Bigayan basement, the group worship service moved to 5 other places over the span of 20 years, each time growing bigger and requiring a new place of worship.
So would you be willing to take us around the city and just kind of show us around and show some of those places?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sure.
All right, let's go hit the road.
For the past 20 years, Regina has experienced continued growth. One of the contributors to growth, immigration.
Many of them were like a lot of Filipinos. They were trying to find a means of living to help support their families at home.
So there wasn't really a clear, I guess, draw. I mean, there were a number of things, but not one real clear industry that was drawing more people.
No, it's just trying to find a better life, and it didn't really matter. Much of the work that then you can turn left here.
Okay.
Much of the work that was found was like, for example, like, oh, right here, sorry, right here. Like say, like cleaning work.
Among those that would move to Regina in the early 2000s was OR nurse Edwin Malang.
Yeah, exactly. I have a friend who first moved here in Canada, and he told me that they're needing of nurses in Saskatchewan. I don't know where is Saskatchewan, specifically Regina. So I Googled it and then I found it. So he gave me an email of the supervisor who was in charge in the operating room. So after the conversation, I asked my wife Marisa to look for the God's Message magazine and look for a place of worship in Regina. And indeed, there is a Regina group worship service, and that's where the God's plan started.
So Brother Edwin reached out to the name listed in the God's Message magazine, Brother Dominic Bigayan, Michael's dad.
We have a group worship service here and we need an officer. And I said, well, I'm an officer po, I'm a head deacon and I could help. So when I arrived here, he welcomed us and his family. We will never forget that. And it was a cold evening when we arrived, I think -20. We're used to +40 and then we arrived at -20, but we're so happy. And then I can't wait for the worship service.
At the time, the local congregation was worshiping at the YMCA.
We make sure that the place of worship where we're conducting our worship gathering is decent enough. But here I said, why in YMCA? For me, if we can keep our home as, decently enough, how much more a place where you're conducting the worship gathering.
So they looked for a new place of worship, and as they outgrew each new place, God allowed them to find one bigger and better. An answered prayer for Brother Dominic, who passed away in 2015, and witnessed the congregation grow from 12 members in his basement to over 300.
Moving from place to place, we can see the work of God, and I will never forget Brother Dominic's inspiration of finding a decent place of worship where we can have our gathering.
So here we are at the house of worship in Regina.
Formerly a Lutheran church, this property on McNaughton Avenue in Regina was purchased in 2011 and underwent months of renovation to transform it into the Church of Christ House of Worship.
If you look at some of the older pictures before the renovation, you'll notice that this entire facade was brick, and then right down the center, where you see the seal and where you see the center facade, there was a window, an entire window running the height of this portion of the building. So as you can see, just from this portion, a lot was already done. The bricks were covered up and the stucco was laid. Also the molding and the seal. So if you'll notice here, the stucco work continues around.
Extreme winter in Regina requires an extra layer of stucco and waterproofing. This is all added after the first layer is completed to ensure that the building can withstand the moisture and cold from the blizzard conditions and the freezing temperature.
As you can see today, it's really cold, and that's one of the reasons why that extra layer of stucco was laid down. Traditionally, there's only one layer, but for here, there's 2 layers. So that does it for us for the exterior stuff, and we'll continue on with some of the interior work.
I caught up with Michael for his first look inside.
So here it is. Wow. The main sanctuary. What do you feel? And just seeing this, I mean, this is my 3rd or 4th time walking in here, and I still feel just chills when I see it.
This is gorgeous.
Do you remember what it looked like before the renovation?
Yeah. It was actually, well, it was much darker. Much darker. It didn't have the chandeliers.
The transformation included extending the pulpit closer towards the congregation, updating the old wooden benches, adding lighting in the front, and chandeliers to brighten up the sanctuary, and removing some of the existing wood paneling and windows in the front and back of the building.
So how does it make you feel? I mean, you were a pioneer. You and your family were pioneers here.
Would you ever imagine having a place like this to worship in for the local congregation?
No. It's always a surprise to hear what else has progressed in terms of the locale, right? So Because back then, when I was a teenager, when the group worship service had started, I really had no idea or even concept the potential of what Regina would become.
Believe it or not, this year was an abnormally warm winter for Regina. And what would normally be covered by snow required additional landscaping leading up to the dedication of the house of worship.
What was involved in the landscaping? Was it grass? Was it rocks?
It was rocks. Yeah. So Brother Edwin, he's a head deacon actually. He's the one who designed all that stuff over there. And so we're just helping out on putting rocks in place. And I was the one in charge on putting the orders and talking to the vendors and making sure they bring here on time so we can get in place just in time for the dedication.
The members of the Church of Christ in Regina were excited to do what they could to help in the preparations.
Yeah, I believe because everyone's got their own full time, and after their work was done, they come here whenever they have time to come and help
Also,
out.
we come here
After work time,
5
and
PM.
every weekend.
After work, so you get a full day of work, and then you come straight here to do more work at the chapel.
We leave here around 11,
night time.
12.
Like what makes you have the energy to even do that after a long day of work? Why would you come back here to do such work?
I think like what our minister said, Brother Paquito Ibanez, that if you don't have that strength, all you gotta do is pray to God, and He'll give you that superhuman strength, like He was always describing. And especially in this last week, I think I could say for myself that I think I got that superhuman strength coming from God, because we long for that dedication with our chapel. So we were very happy on all these blessings, so then why not take part in helping out and making it beautiful? I think that's one of the main things we're aiming for.
March 19, 2016, the members of the Church of Christ arrived at 70 McNaughton Avenue to witness the day that they had prayed for many years. Many traveled hundreds of miles to be part of this historic occasion, including Michael, his mom and sister, who had since relocated to Ontario after Brother Dominic passed away. The dedication worship service was led by the executive minister, Brother Eduardo V. Manalo. This was the 5th house of worship dedicated in 6 weeks in North America. The day was made even more special with the ordination of 10 new ministers, the first ordination to be held in Canada.
This is the promise that God given us. Our executive minister is standing in front of us, giving us inspiration with a beautiful message he has given us, that we need to be ever stronger in our faith, that nothing is impossible. If you pray for things, nothing is impossible. God will give it to us.
Though the journey to this house of worship had taken years to complete, God's timing was never late or early. In fact, it is always just as He planned.
Just after your inauguration, it's amazing. So it's beautiful.
One day after the dedication, Regis, a resident of Regina, found his way to McNaughton
I'm
Avenue.
new in the area, so I was looking for where are the places of worship around. So I don't live far away from here. Actually, I'm on Royal Street. So then I saw something like this, and then I felt, let me go and see.
Though still a new addition to this community, this newly dedicated house of worship is already fulfilling its purpose of introducing the Church of Christ to a community that yearns so much for a better future.
I will come back for sure.
Okay.
I was hoping to see the service today, but it's beautiful that I meet you here today. So.
It's been a great trip here in Regina. A bit cold, but the people have definitely been very warm. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Blueprint, where in the end, everything is part of God's plan.
On the next Blueprint, hear the stories that transformed this former arts building into a house of worship of the Iglesia Ni Cristo.